Hey guys, I'm Brad of Brave the Woods, and today I've invited my good friend Joel Santana, a character illustrator, to join me and teach me how to draw. We're actually going to draw Edgar Allan Poe, but we're going to be drawing a character and trying to figure out how he does his painting or his colors and his lighting, and just learn from a master here. So Joel's is an incredibly talented illustrator who's mastered character design. He's the way he uses colors and the way he handles his lighting is just incredible. It makes everything want to just pop right out of the screen. I'm super jealous. I really wanted to learn from him, so selfishly I invited him here to teach me, and I'm going to draw along with him as he teaches us, and then hopefully you guys get something too out of this. But everyone, this is Joel Santana.
Cool, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me here, man. And I'm really excited to do this, to paint, and for both of us to share a little bit of just what we know with everybody. So yeah, I'm excited about this.
Good, man. I'm glad you're here. I know we talked about, it's kind of fun just learning from each other because we might have some overlap in what we do, but usually the process is so different in how we approach it and the way that you use these programs. And we're using Photoshop today. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we'll be using Photoshop.
Okay, cool. Well, how about you just do a little brief introduction of who you are? I kind of gave you a little intro, but if you want to give yourself a little further one and then tell us what we're going to do today.
Cool, man. Yeah. So as you mentioned, my name is Joel Santana, and I'm a character illustrator. So I do a little bit more than just character illustration, but that's my focus. And then I usually use Photoshop. I use Illustrator and some other things at times. For the most part, I'm sketching on paper, scanning it in, and then as far as my creative process goes, for the most part, I'm rendering and painting in Photoshop. And I've been painting and drawing now for about 14 years professionally, and working at an ad agency for the past 4 or 5 years now. So yeah.
Nice. And we met a year ago, right? Or I guess 2 years ago at Creative South.
At Creative South, that's right. Yeah, I've been there through my job a couple years now. I love that. I love going to that conference. It's really cool. And we did meet there, and immediately I think we kind of clicked because of our passion for illustration. So again, and I think it's exciting when you meet somebody who has, meeting somebody like you with your level of talent and skill. And I think it's even more exciting when it's so different from the type of work that you do, because, as not everybody, I wouldn't say everybody's like this, but a lot of us are, who like to learn and continue to grow our craft. It's like you get excited about that person's creative approach. And I mean, you still stay true to what you do, but it's kind of nice to see that style and maybe learn a little bit from it. I think that even though you stay true to your style, you could always apply something from that person's process to yours.
Oh, 100%. It's funny because we're mentioning Creative South. I think conferences in general, every time these creatives get together, we tend to start comparing ourselves and being like, oh my gosh, this guy is so good at this, or this gal is so amazing at this. And you kind of wonder where did I drop the ball? It's like, I can't do lettering. I can't do this or whatever. But it's like, honestly, you can't do it all, and you shouldn't. I mean, what you do is incredible, and I respect it. And what I want to learn from you is just a little bit of just your process, because like you said, you can pull little nuggets away from what you've done, and you can apply that in your own style, which I think is kind of what I want these interviews to be. I just want to see, just how you approach it, and then you can apply that however you need in your own little niche and things. So
exactly, totally agree.
Cool. This should be fun. And so today we're going to be drawing Edgar Allan Poe, which is already amazing. And you've already started on it. You have the sketch and the base, the base shapes and everything. So you're going to teach us how to do the painting with to kind of give it this three-dimensional feel. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So with what I started off here, I'll turn off some of these layers so I can kind of explain what I did. Just briefly. So my sketch layer, and I have it on multiply, set to multiply, and I have it down to 37% opacity. Okay. So what I have that on the very top, and then what I do is, I didn't do it here. I skipped that part, but, using the lasso tool, I just kind of say if this is off, I just kind of go around on my whole shape here, not like this, but much better. It's very tedious. But I
Sure.
go around the whole thing, and then once I have that, I fill it with the color, and then that's my silhouette. So once I do that, then I like to separate clothes and then like hair. So the hair and then the clothes are on a separate layer. Um, and then I create another layer here, and then I use a clipping mask. And this is where I kind of add all of my rendering, all the light, color variation, and that stuff. So
So to
what
be,
I wait,
I'll cut you off real quick. So just to be clear for everyone who's watching, you're adding that layer mask there because it's non-destructive, correct? Like you're not going to be messing
yeah.
with that original color layer that you had, the base shape.
Correct, yeah. So
Okay.
this is my base, this is my, this is my base shape here. And I'm gonna have this as a clipping mask so that, yeah, as you said, it's non-destructive, and I'll still, anytime that you have things, I end up, as I move through my process, and you'll see, I end up flattening things anyways, and eventually I'm working off of one layer the closer I get to finish.
Okay.
But this is a nice way to start off.
Awesome. Yeah. No, that looks great. So go. So I'll let you run with it, and I'll ask questions and
Cool.
stop you along the way. But yeah, go ahead and start doing your thing because so I have it on mine as well. I'm gonna try and follow along a little bit here. I'm not gonna show mine as much. I have his file. He sent me this base file. But maybe as you're working, I'm just gonna ask you a few questions like these references that you have here. How are those helping you?
So, for me, I mean, I love using reference, any chance that I get. So for personal work, I don't, sometimes I don't use reference if it's just like a lunch sketch that I'm doing, middle of the day, and then, it's not that serious. But for the most part, even for like something like this, it's just like something for fun, that I would plan on maybe sharing on social or whatever. I need reference. So for him, I'm not showing any references that I use to draw him because I'm going to focus more on painting.
Sure.
But so for example here, this is more it's not so much for my lighting. It's mostly for skin, to be honest. It's mostly to
Interesting.
see,
Okay.
yeah, so for example, like here with these guys or with this guy here, you see, it's, I've heard other people describe painting as it's learning how to look at things. And so there's not just one shade of color on his face. You see some pinks in there. There's some yellow. There's some even yellows that feel a little green more up here on the forehead. So all those color variations, and then even here on this 3D character, you also have color variation on her skin. That's what makes the character feel more dimensional, more realistic. So even
Got it.
though it's a cartoon, it's super stylized. The color variation on the skin, it makes it feel more lifelike.
Wow.
So
Okay, that's super interesting because I've used references before, but I've typically just done it for like, yeah, I would have done Edgar Allan Poe, figured that out to kind of get the pull references for his character. But then after that, I guess because I don't do what you do, I don't do a lot of like dimensional looking paintings,
yeah,
and so it tends to be more of a guessing game for me. And I'm like, yeah, the light would hit it about here.
yeah,
But it's kind of hard to get that because like what I end up doing is just saying, okay, the light's coming from this direction, so everything kind of, I don't know. I'm glad to see that this is something that you do because this helps you kind of get an idea for how maybe even like the ambient light, like what's picking up off the shirt. You can change
yeah.
that to whatever color that you have on the shirt of your character to kind of where that reflects on the face and kind of where those imperfections are. That's interesting. I like that.
Exactly. Yeah, you do. And that's a good point too, because your ambient light, things that are around that character, so it's gonna bounce off. So like on this character here, right under his or her chin, there's a lot of white under there. So I feel like, if you have a notebook or a book open in front of you, and it's high up enough, and if there's enough light hitting it, that's going to bounce off and reflect white under so it's different things like that are going to reflect. So
Okay.
it's really fun when you have a stylized character like this portrait of Edgar Allan Poe is very stylized, very cartoony, but when you add realistic lighting to it, I think I don't know, it's just such a fun thing to do. And there's artists that I follow that do that really, really well, like Ryan Lang and Lin Chen is another one. And hopefully we can share some links with people so they can check their work out because it's just done really, really well. So I try my best. Those are guys that I look up to, and I try to kind of, match that style. But I've been having a lot of fun playing around with this kind of technique for the past couple of years now.
Yeah, well, it shows. It looks really, it looks awesome, and I like what you're saying though, because like you can still have, because this is something that I kind of that I toy with. Like I when I try to go like extreme, like extreme features and really like elongate like or emphasize certain features like caricatures. But when I try to go that far, I kind of lose like the whole reality part. Like there's like you're taking it, you're kind of distorting it into this cartoon like sketch or this cartoon figure, but then you're making him feel very dimensional and real. I think that's a cool kind of juxtaposition because like when I do it, it's hard too because when I try to do it, it kind of separates. Like I'll be like, okay, well he's all cartoony, so he's going to be like flat colors or really bright, obnoxious colors. It's just not going to feel very real. So it's neat that you found a way to make it to happen like that because it's cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's a tough balance too because it's easy, especially in this style. It's very easy to start getting when you're rendering this. It's very easy for it to start feeling like too. I don't want to say too realistic because it's fine if you want to go that route, but it still has to feel in this style for me at least. My ultimate goal is it still needs to feel like a cartoon. And I still want it to be very clear that this is like a cartoon portrait, and not like I'm not trying to do a Rembrandt or something like that, So the stylizing and the hard shapes and edges, I think that's what kind of helps, keep it feeling like a cartoon. Almost kind of like the way you see the 3D characters in movies where they almost feel like rubber, kind of rubbery or kind of like a little action figure or something,
Oh, I see. They got that sheen to them.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So while you're doing. So I guess one question I'm gonna ask you while you're working here. So when you're building up these colors, how are you? Just tell me what you're thinking when you're building up these colors. So I notice you're like picking like very similar hues or different similar values within the same hue and kind of building up over top of it. So do you kind of just continually build and then you add your kind of like your crisper details at the end or?
Absolutely. Yes, that is exactly right. So right now what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to focus on like the bigger shapes and, and I've heard like different people kind of teach this in different ways. I know there's another artist, I can't remember his name right now, but, where he was just teaching in the beginning when it's something like skin, he's just kind of adding a bunch of different color variations within that same tone. So it's, it's still like a flesh color, but there's some pieces are a bit more red, some are a bit more yellow, some are just a little darker. And then creating that subtle variation all throughout is what makes it feel more organic and there's a more life to it. Then as I progress and I get like a little further on down the line, I start to focus on more details, but I try to leave all the details and all those little things for last. A lot of times we jump into the detail part too quick. And I think that starts to kind of, for me at least, it starts to kind of box me in too quick. At first I just want to kind of find shape. Sometimes, I mean, to quote Bob Ross, I do believe in happy accidents, because you're painting in these big shapes and sometimes, just by a simple brush stroke, it kind of, you see something that's like, oh, okay, that looks kind of cool. I might actually change this or do something a little bit different. Whereas if I jump too quick into details, those accidents aren't going to happen. I'm going to be too restricted right off the bat. So yeah, right now it's just all big shapes and blending in with the skin. Like I said, it's picking some reds, some yellows, and just varying it up just to create some variety and some dimension. But you know what? I am going to try to rush through this so that we can we're not going to finish this painting.
Sure.
By the end of the video, but so that we could at least get to a place where it at least feels like it makes sense what you're looking at.
No, that's good. I'll show everyone at the end of this video, they'll get to see if you had all the time in the world when you finish this, what it'll look like.
Yeah,
So they'll see
cool,
the finished.
Man. Yeah, because it's hard, and so also for me, this is the first time I'd be like kind of painting and then also talking through my process at the same time. No, but it's good. I've been wanting to do stuff like this for a while, so I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do that.
Well, dude, the pleasure is all mine, dude. I really appreciate it and this is actually how I find that I work the best is when, I'll have somebody, or especially when I'm trying to teach us. So I teach a lot of Skillshare videos, as people know. I'll teach a lot of online classes, and when people ask me, they give me ideas for classes. The best way, I get ideas for a new class would be just literally drawing something and then having somebody over my shoulder asking questions.
Yeah.
And so as they're asking questions while I'm working, I'll be like, oh yeah, I didn't even think to vocalize that at any point, or I don't know why I do that, and I should probably figure out why I'm doing it. Maybe it's or how do I put this into words? Because when you start putting it into words, you start to understand it. And if you're like, okay, I can't put it into words, and it's like, okay, let me look up what I'm doing. And what is this? I don't know why I always do that. And then you kind of start thinking about why you do it. And then once you understand it fully, I think that's just the whole teacher thing. The teachers, I feel get them. When you start teaching something, you start understanding it so much better. Not just because of the research you put into it, but the things that you discover when you start talking about it.
Yeah.
And so having you on here, I feel not that I'm doing you a favor because you're learning, but it's really, it's really helpful to have you on here and kind of walk us through. Because and when I ask questions, as someone's working, it's so much easier because it's in context as well.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's a really good point. It's funny that you say that. Kind of comforting to hear somebody else say that, we do things and we're like, it's not until you try to teach somebody that you realize, why do I do that? I'm not sure why I do that, but it works, and, which is why another reason why I think that even teaching on its own, it's such a talent, it's such a skill because, it's just not that easy to do. I've watched tutorials where, the artist will say, oh, and he'll say oh, you just keep messing with it until it feels right. And I'm like, what do you mean until it feels right? I don't know what it's supposed to,
But you would say the same thing. I did that same thing. I'm like, yeah, wait, but that doesn't really help me. And they're like, how do you do your colors? How do you choose your color palettes? I'm like, I don't know. It just feels right to have those colors. I choose a few colors. Dude, that's the one I get asked all the time is colors. And I have to really think about it and be like, okay, these are analogous color. I had to learn all the terminology. I learned it in school, but I forgot it when I started working because I don't use those. You don't use those terms all the time when you're working. It just is second nature now. You don't sit there and be like, okay, now these analogous colors or that's you don't go through and use the same lingo. You just work.
Yeah, no, I completely. And you know what? I guess I should probably take those words back because I want to say that sometimes I kind of think of it that way. And I you know what? I think that's part of what I mentioned earlier with the one artist who said, learning how to paint is kind of, you could describe it as that you're learning how to look at things, and you're learning how to look at color. And the more you do it, the more that you do see those color variations in people's skin or whatever it is that you're painting. But that again, that just comes with time. And so I guess that's probably where it comes from when people say, oh, and until it feels right. I think that's what it is that it's hard to explain. It's really just how you look at colors. So it's I don't know how you would explain to somebody. I don't know how you would explain that. I guess that's what people kind of struggle with explaining color. And
I think so. And so I guess it's you also have to. So maybe the answer, a lot of it is teaching the process of, what you just said, how to see, how to see the colors, not necessarily which colors you would choose, but how to see color by talking maybe more broadly about what do these colors do when they go next to each, when these two colors are next to each other. Not necessarily, it's not important what the, it's not important where I got the inspiration. It's oh yeah, I saw that off an old tin, at an antique store, and that's why I just stole it. I stole the color palette, all right, everybody. I stole the color palette, and it's I don't know how to tell you what do you do to go in and build a color palette. So a lot of times I kind of start with one color, then I'll start thinking, for example, the Edgar Allan Poe's. This is a great example, just what you're doing right now. It's like, who told you the palette? Well, you're playing around with the skin, and I'm assuming you're like, okay, that little red on the nose right now, like, like you're just kind of, it's just feel, right? It's like this part needs to be a little bit darker underneath the eyes, but I want to throw in, like you said, I want to throw in a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red, and there might not be a complete purpose for it. You're like, he doesn't have a runny nose. But maybe,
exactly.
like it's not what it is, or maybe it's not because certain light's hitting in a certain way. It's because it's just visually more interesting, and that's a hard thing to explain because you do have to have an eye for it. So I'm struggling too to figure out how to teach things like that when you can't be so specific, and people want like a formula, and you don't really have a formula. It's more training your eyes and your brain to think a certain way or look a certain way.
Yeah, and I think that some people see it as a cheap answer when you say, "Oh, you want to get better? Like, how do you get better? How do you get better at this, at painting, at art?" And I feel like sometimes people think that it's a cheap answer to say that, the best way to do it is just to keep doing it, to keep practicing. And it's like, well, that's not, if when you're starting off, I feel like, you're as a new person, you feel like, well, that's not really helping me. And it's like, man, but eventually you end up finding out, wow, it really is just that. Like, the more I do it, the more I get it, the more I understand. And so one thing that I didn't mention yet, but that it is true and it has helped me a lot is painting from life. So yeah, I don't like doing realistic portraits of, people, and I don't, I love drawing cartoons is what I like to do. But the more that I practice, drawing from life, whether it's drawing off of a photo or actually in person, like going to the mall and sketching people or painting, a landscape in person, the more you study reality, the more you learn enough about it where you can then exaggerate it later on down the line and still have it make sense. Somebody, I think it was John Lasseter that said that, and now I'm not going to remember the quote, but it was something along the lines of, learning how to exaggerate life. Like you have to study from life. You have to learn how to master that before you can exaggerate it. And so a lot of these artists that do stuff like that, it's one of the questions that I hear people asking a lot too is, how do you know what to exaggerate? Exaggerate the forehead, the nose, and it's really just you draw from life, and little by little you kind of start to realize, okay, what can I stretch and pull where this person still feels like they still kind of look like who they're supposed to be. So
that's great advice, because I think a lot of people try to shortcut their way through this stuff. Like I'm speaking to everyone watching this this video right now. It's easy to come away from these things and be like, or try to like have the expectation that you watch this video and all of a sudden you can paint just like Joel.
Yeah.
And it's or you're I mean, or maybe you don't think you can, and maybe that's why you're like frustrated. But you're not going to get it straight from this video. But the things that he's talking about, and you can watch his process and you can practice and draw. You can draw Edgar Allan Poe just like he's drawing it right now and practice it. Don't claim it as your own and post it as your own. But, I honestly will go and like see how other people are doing it. And I love watching like their time lapses or whatever, because I'm like, oh, that's how they built up the color. But this is even better because Joel's giving you some insight into like what he's doing and how he's doing it. But taking all that, and then what we're saying is this isn't going to be your solve all. This is literally just going to give you the appetite, I feel like, to go out and start practicing it.
Yeah.
And then now that you have that knowledge and you can see that, then you can start applying that and it really is mileage. It really is just putting in the mileage to get the type of, to get to this point. But yeah, I really appreciate that, Joel, because like I think a lot of people will get frustrated real early on or expect them, they haven't done like exactly exaggerating characters like this, but not having any knowledge of anatomy or real life drawing. That's going to be really hard. And because you won't know why that's there, or how far can I like bend that or like protrude that cheekbone without it being weird, because that's not where that cheekbone is. Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean? That feels weird because it's not where it's supposed to be on the body, but you can move that and manipulate it on the face as long as everything else, like when you're doing these caricatures, as long as they're like in the right spot in proportion to everything else. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's rules that are there in place.
It does make sense, and I think like what you said, and that's what I think a lot of people feel like, oh, that's not the answer I want to hear, which is mileage, and but that's really, I know it's not an exciting answer, like, oh, that's the trick, but it's so true. That's exactly what it is. Like, it's the more that you practice, and I also believe that there's also wasted practice, like wasted time. You could,
Explain
you
that,
know,
yeah.
and to me, what I mean by that is like, you could spend every day drawing. You could draw every single day and not get better. And to me, when does that
It's
happen? I
true.
think that happens when you're drawing the exact same thing every day. So if you're really good at drawing, like, I don't know, Woody Woodpecker, and you draw him every single day, then yeah, you're drawing every day, but you're not really challenging yourself to try something new. You're not, so, and a lot of, I think, the growth that people see when they're trying to get better at painting or drawing, it comes in practicing the basics, the foundation, the fundamentals. So like I said, drawing from life, draw some people. If you like drawing characters, draw from people. If you like drawing scenes and you're like, oh, I want to be a concept artist and draw backgrounds and paint, then go out and paint nature, like draw from life. Most of your inspiration is going to come from doing that, and most of your growth as an artist, I believe, is going to come from that as well. So,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, how many kids do you remember growing up could draw Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon,
yeah,
and they, characters, but they couldn't draw anything else, and they're like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, you look like. I thought they were like, everybody's like, oh, they're so good at drawing, and then they try to draw like a horse and they can't, like, which is
yeah,
super hard, and they can't
that's
do
very
it. It's just funny to like. You're right. You can waste that time of like putting in the mileage if you're really not pushing yourself, and that's why you're here for me. Like this whole channel, like every week I try something new, and maybe mine's a little extreme, where I'll do like a completely new style, but even within your own style, like just trying different animals and challenging yourself. Like if it's animals that you like or
exactly.
characters, draw like for me, I don't draw women as much as I draw men. And I
Yeah,
don't know why, if I'm just like scared to like mess up drawing women. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you don't want to like, oh, I don't want to over sexualize it, but I don't want to like make her look
exactly.
butch, or I don't want to like offend any, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is, my own insecurities, but I always have a harder time drawing women, and it's easier with men. But that's for me. So my challenge would be try to draw women like more, and that would really push me a lot further than what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think that's a normal thing though, for artists. If you follow almost anybody on Instagram or whatever, I feel like you'll see that there's obviously exceptions, but for the most part, I feel like you do see that, oh, this person's always drawing females, or this person always draw males, I think, yeah, I don't know where that comes from. For me, I always say that I got it from like comic books. I used to always draw males. And I
Yeah.
think I got that from drawing, from comic books. When I was
Oh,
little,
okay.
that's how I learned how to draw. And so even females, I would always draw them with like broad shoulders and a little too
Yeah.
masculine.
Yeah,
And I
that was
knew it's
it.
because of that influence. But
Okay, good. I'm glad
yeah.
I'm not the only one. So what are some of your influences? What got you into this type of style that you enjoy, like characters and the style of how you style these characters?
Well, for me, I mean, as far as the work itself and always drawing cartoons, for me, that comes a lot from like Disney. I've always, I always thought when I was younger, I thought, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be an animator. And so I've always been drawn to like, cartoons and characters, but specifically the Disney style. And then now, just fast forward many years later, now in my career, um, I've always, so I guess, sorry, going just real quick, going back to then
Yeah.
also as a kid, I love to paint. I always really, really loved painting.
Oh,
Uh,
that's a really good thing, because a lot of
yeah,
people ask like, okay, where do you learn, like, how did you learn how to digitally paint? I'm like, well, I painted in real life first. That's how I know how
yeah,
these things move. So I'm glad you said that, because I get a lot of people who are like designers or things like that, who don't have the fine art side, and they get
uh-huh,
frustrated and say like, well, how did you like do that, or this looks amazing. How did you do that? And it's like, well, I did this in real life. I mean,
yeah,
and then the computer makes it like even easier. I feel like for
yeah.
me. But sorry, that's just. I'm glad you said that. Go ahead.
No, that's a really good point. I think, and I'm glad that you brought it up that way because, um, same thing. People ask like, oh, how do you get better at digital painting? And I'm like, well, you got to think about the question that you're asking. Like, are you asking, how do I get better at painting, or how do I get better at digital painting?
One's a
Because
tool and
yeah,
or a
like,
medium,
and
yeah.
then if you're not good at painting, then you're not going to be good at digital painting. Like, digital painting makes it easier for a painter or somebody who understands how to paint to
Exactly.
do the work. But, and nobody wants to hear that. Like, hey, if you want to get better, go buy some canvases and buy some oil paints or whatever and watercolors and do that. And they're like, oh, because everyone they want to learn now, today, and they want to put out masterpiece tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I think, going back to your original question, I think that, the inspiration, it comes from, I like to paint these characters and render the crap out of them because I like to paint. I try to get the drawing part out of the way as soon as I can because I want to
Yes.
jump into the painting part right. That's the part that I love. And I think that comes from, again, as a kid, I always liked, painting. And then as far as like the style, the way that I paint these characters, I'll share, hopefully you'll be able to share some links later, but,
I definitely will.
artists like Ryan Lang are just amazing. I mean, if you look up his work, it's just absolutely mind blowing. Ryan Lang and there's, gosh, now of course I'm not gonna be able to think of some of my heroes. Peter DeSev, a little bit different, not as rendered, but really like his style. But for the most part, I feel like their styles. I think that you could definitely see the inspiration that I draw from from the way that they kind of approach it.
Dude, that's awesome. And yeah, so below you can see actually in the description below, here's all the links here that you can see that he's mentioned and links to his work, which I'll mention here in a minute. But dude, that's just going. I'm gonna go back now to when you were saying about the painting because when you said it really hit home when you were talking about when we were talking about colors and you were saying, oh yeah, there's just like you add a little bit of like green gets mixed into there or whatever. That's because in real life when you're painting, your brush, you accidentally, like, because you're mixing colors by hand, and in your brush, when you're loading your brush, a lot of times when you're trying to clean it off, you still have little bits of something on it. And those are those happy accidents that come out. Like I'll be like, you go straight from, yellow and you go clean off your brush and you go to like a blue or something or a blue to a yellow. You clean up, you can't get all the blue out. Then you go to paint your yellow, you get a little bit of green mixed in.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, that's like kind of cool looking, or it's just inevitable and you have to be okay with it because it always kind of gets into your process. But that's how I learned to be okay with that. And that became kind of a style. You started seeing like, oh yeah, those colors are going to kind of mix together and it looks kind of cool, a little bit more interesting.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I'm glad you said it that way because like that's really how I learned it, and just talking to you now is really the only way I've put that two and two together. Because especially people want to know too, like how, not just dimensional. How do you get it more? How do you make something feel warmer or more tactile? So because you're making stuff on the computer all the time, people can like you create things and they're very vector a lot of the time, and so or they're just come off very computer generated flat. Yeah. And so what you do makes it feel so much more alive and warm and tactile is kind of what I'm getting at, because you're able to mix in those tones and like in those values and things, which I try to do even when I have like a flat like vector illustration. I'll bring it into Photoshop afterwards. I find myself like coloring it back in. Let's say it's a yellow circle. I'll color it in as a yellow circle, and then I'll just do like a hint of blue in it, and I'll just do that like a hint of blue in that yellow, and I'll color in a little section again, and I'll kind of make it feel so it just doesn't feel so flat. It feels printed or something. There's some quality to it. That there's varying values in it and hues that make it feel just so much better. And I don't know how else to explain that. Then maybe that's where it came from.
You explained it way better than the way I always tell people. For me personally, I hate for my work to look like it was done in the computer, like I try to make my painted characters look like it was natural. I mean, I think at the end of the day, especially if you're more familiar with digital painting and you understand it, I guess you'll be able to tell that somebody did it, digitally. but I like those, or I like leaving in those brushstrokes in there, and leaving some of the roughness in there, because it feels like it was used, it was created in traditional media.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's just something that, like you said, it comes with doing painting in traditional media and understanding and seeing your memory. Like I always tell people, it's always good to have reference, but little by little, the more you paint, the more that you study from life, the more that your visual library, that your mental library, you build that mental library up. And so some of
Yeah.
the things that you're doing that, like we were talking about earlier, like, man, I don't even know why I do that. There's a reason why you do that. You just, you don't realize it, but it just comes so natural. And it's probably because it comes from your traditional painting, things that you did when you first started off before you even touched the computer.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Okay, I'm going to show, while you're doing this, I'm going to show everyone so I haven't been showing my screen because I think yours is much more fascinating than watching what I'm doing, but I'm going to show mine real quick so let me see if I can. Oh, that's yours. Let me do this here. Oh, here I am. Let me do this. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Oh, here we go. All right. So mine looks terrible.
oh man.
But it's funny, but I didn't expect it to look great. I'm not, so I'm honest. I've been using the brushes that you sent me, and those are in the links below. The brushes that, Lowish, I think they were called.
Yep.
And, so those are free brushes that you can get below. But I have those, and so I'm a little out of my element with the brushes, and I'm using his file, but I'm not giving myself excuses, because this is your style, and I'm trying to follow along here and ask you questions, but you can immediately notice the difference between mine and yours, because mine's a little bit, like, mine's not only choppier, but I just the colors, the great, like, how you have those colors blending together on the face just feels so much more natural and real. And mine kind of still feel like they're fully separate color layers. You're like, okay, now that's a color, that's a color, that's a color. When in yours, it just kind of all feels like a, homogeneous piece, like, which is good. Like, you want that to feel all, I don't know, very smooth. The colors smoothly, like, combine with themselves. So I don't know how else to say that. Then mine just feels very choppy.
I wish I could see it. I can't see your screen, but I'll have to. Yeah,
it's okay. I'll show you after.
I think if we do another video like this again, and then I try to kind of learn from you and do your style, I'm sure I'm gonna be struggling the same way. I think I completely agree with you. You're out of your element, even if it's, for me personally, I'll say, like, even if I'm using somebody else's brushes or some brushes that I've never used before, that completely throws me off. So
yeah. Oh, wow, I got all three of us on here. Yeah. Here, I'm going to get rid of myself here. I'm going to add you to yourself. That doesn't make sense on your end, but when you see this video, you'll understand. So for everyone watching, I'm using Ecamm Live. It's an awesome program. I'm trying to figure out. I'm still learning on how to toggle between my screens, but yeah, dude, you're right. And what I brought it up. The only reason I brought it up and showed you what I was working on is because it's not one of those things that you can just like follow along. And maybe if you've been working in his style, in that similar style, this may be a lot easier to you and may make just like click immediately. But for me, it's still, there's the learning curve is the lighting and just getting those colors to smoothly mesh well together. So I'm really happy because I want to play around with this a little bit more. Mine tends to be a little bit more like higher, like a much higher contrast with my colors. Because mine's a little bit more graphic. The quality I go for is more graphic, so it's trying to make it look real. It really shows the amount of time that you put into this style and into just painting and looking and working off real people, because it shows in the work that you do. And I think that's important for people to know that this is not just something he learned over the weekend. This is years of work. So.
Absolutely.
And it looks amazing, dude. So I'm gonna wrap things up right here. Dude, you got way further than I thought we would. If this
Oh man,
this is good. This is awesome, and
thank you. I'm still. It's hard. Yeah. I really. I wasn't sure how far along I was gonna get. I was hoping to get even further along, and I feel like I talked to somebody else about this the other day. Like anytime I'm on the spot painting, I feel like 20 or 30% dumber. Like I just forget, like, okay, wait a minute. I forgot to use this tool, or no, I usually start with this part first, or so, but no, this has been awesome, dude. I really, really enjoy this opportunity. I'm glad that you did this.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. And honestly, so we spent, I think, an hour and a half before this trying to get this all set up until I just broke down and bought Ecamm Live to make this happen. But I really appreciate you taking out the time to do this and to teach me and to teach everyone watching. We'll definitely have you back on because this was a lot of fun and I learned a ton. So let me just before I let you go, is there any shameless plugs that you want to throw in there for work you do? I know you have a shop and that's Mad Hat Co. Is that right?
madhatco.com is my online store, and then so I have my online store, and I guess one thing, if it's okay for me to shameless plug, is my Skillshare class. I do a lot of the techniques, and like I do go over how I kind of set up the art before I get started on painting. I go more into like my brushes. I talk a little bit more about my research and all those things. And so if you check out my class on Skillshare.com, we'll provide those links to you guys. That'll definitely, what you saw here today, I go way more in depth. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that because I obviously I'm on Skillshare as well. So I always, and it's funny because like people are like, okay, you're on Skillshare, you just throw videos up and you don't use. I use Skillshare all the time, so I will be watching your videos because then I could put more actual time into this. But go check out his shop too. Like you said, madhatco.com.
Madhatco.com. Yeah.
Okay. .com. Yeah. So it's right below. You can buy prints. You can even get his work on pillows, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I've got all kinds of stuff. So yeah, definitely check it out.
That's cool. Well, thank you so much for all of you guys who are watching. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video and let me hang out with Joel here. For those of you who are brand new, please subscribe. And for everybody else, if you like the video, please give it a like and comment below. And if you have anybody in mind that you'd like to see or any styles that you want me to tackle or interview someone for, drop those in the comments as well. So, all right. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.